Harry Siemens going to talk about it all and much more here on today's edition of the Farm Report on Rise and Shine Manitoba. The Farm Report brought to you by Wolf Enterprises. And as always, on these Wednesday mornings, Harry Siemens joining the show now. Harry, great to have you on the show once again for this week. I got to start off by asking you, how has your day been going so far? How's your morning been so far on this
You know
Wednesday?
what? It's been great. I think I'm almost recovered from my COVID experience back in the beginning of October. So, you know what? Things are good. Just a thing before we get into farming and agriculture. Someday, when you have a moment, like a half an hour, let me tell you about my experience in my fastball days. Secondly, more importantly, I umpired over 1,500 ball games. And someday I would like to talk a little bit about that for the simple reason it was quite an experience. But I'm doing good. You know what? I'm alive and awake and I'm ready to rock and roll. And we've got the farm report.
Yeah, of course. Always great to start off our editions of Rise and Shine Manitoba with the Farm Report. And I might have to take you up on that, Harry, getting you on, maybe not for the Farm Report, but talking about
Sure.
your days of umpiring fastball, which would be pretty awesome to hear your experiences there. But let's start off with an update on a story that you were talking about last week. I know that you probably have more info on it now, but the update on the pea plant that you were talking about.
Well, the right now we've got that major flood event in British Columbia, and it's shut down roads, it's shut down railways. There is, for now, only air traffic between here and British Columbia, Vancouver, BC. And so that has a major effect. We haven't seen a lot of things about, because it seems like it may be temporary in the long run. It's quite a situation. The pictures I've seen and the videos, with the Coquihalla Highway that I drove just a year and a half ago, and drove it many times, it's gone in places. It's gone. And railway cars were lying down at the bottom of the gully. I mean, this is serious stuff. So I've had a chance to visit with Mary Jane Bennett, who is a consultant for the railroads in British Columbia, and then also with Jonathan Driedger, who's with Left Field Marketing, a grain marketing company on behalf of farmers. And when I talked to him last week, I think Friday, it was basically like, it's too early to see what the effects will be. Since then, CP Rail has come on and said that they're hopefully going to have a track movable or where they can travel on it, travelable at the. But who knows? At this point, we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen any activity. So it's really, you can't get stuff out of Vancouver, and you can't get stuff into Vancouver. And a majority of Western Canadian farm commodities, they they uh, they move out of the coast, and that's a big challenge. So right now, basically, what we're looking at is crop that's moved there before the flood. That's going to be available to the exporters or export markets. The crop that's on the prairies right now, we're going to have to just wait and see. And that's a challenge that we're going to see. It's affected the market. Anytime we have a disruption in the entire situation like that, it affects markets and it becomes, excuse me, it becomes unpredictable. And so that's what we're facing right now. And I'll talk about it a bit more at the end with my tip for the week for farmers. But yeah, it's a real challenge at this point, and we're going to have to just wait and see. The challenge for us is basically moving product,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the challenge for the people that are living in situations where there's everything's gone. I mean, everything's underwater. Merritt, BC, I visited together with my wife many, many, many times. We stop in at a very good Starbucks. All of that's underwater, and so it's a really a terrible situation and somewhat man-made from a standpoint that they have a lake that there is no way of getting that water out of that lake where Abbotsford, BC, and those places are on, except pumping. So they got pumps running day and night. in order to, the water's coming in on one end and they've got to pump it out at the other because the dam broke. And so that's the situation that we face right now. And somebody asked me, well, how come there can be so much damage? We don't have the, well, must remember, water comes from higher altitudes where it rains in the mountains and it just starts to wash with a tremendous force of nature. Here on the prairies, we just have little incline or decline, and water flows pretty quickly and can cause damage. But over there, it's caused major, major, major catastrophe for the local people, especially.
Yeah, and prayers out to everyone there that's been affected by the floods, just the travesty that's happened there in British Columbia. Hoping that they're able to get through it and able to get through this. But looking at it, Harry, you talked about the grain markets. Told me on text yesterday that was something you wanted to talk about. The grain markets in lieu of the floods on the West Coast. Have a bit more into how much the grain markets are being affected.
Well, at this point, it's really too early to tell exactly what will happen. I haven't seen major movement on the grain markets. I think everybody's kind of holding still. The key thing is for farmers to continue to be in conversation with their buyers. The elevator grain companies that handle the grain, and then to just keep looking. So the markets are just kind of hanging in there. They've come down a little bit, but at the same time, it's still an interesting situation for farmers as to what is going to be happening there. So, yeah, that's all I can really say with the grain markets.
Now, talk about carbon impulses. You were talking about that yesterday as some of the things that you wanted to talk about. Talk about exactly what you meant by that, what's going on with carbon impulses.
Well, we've got all this discussion going on about carbon taxes, carbon credits, and carbon, that we're emitting carbon and causing climate change and all of that. That's not what I'm getting into. This discussion is about how do you see it working as far as pulse crops and farmers and where they will fit into this. And I had a chance to visit with, his name is Dennis Tremorin from the Pulse Canada, the organization that oversees pulses. Everything other than soybeans. The soybeans have their own association. This has to do, and he says, yeah, I can, and here's the transcription of the interview I did with Dennis. He says, I can speak to that. He says, Harry, it's kind of my specialty. At the end of the day, when we talk about how people measure carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, the major greenhouse gas from crop production is tied to fertilizer. Manufacturing, especially nitrogen fertilizer, is a fairly intense process. Requires a lot of natural gas. The second element that we consider is when we're applying these fertilizer to soils. We know there's a gas called nitrous oxide that's emitted. When we're growing crops like pulses that are effectively fixing nitrogen from the air using inoculants and soil bacteria, we are eliminating that from the cropping system for a year. And it has to do with peas and lentils and fava beans. And that reminds me, the other thing I should have told you about, they had a gala opening of the pea plant at Portage la Prairie, Roquettes. And I had a chance to be part of that on last week, Wednesday, right after our show. And it was a gala. I mean, it was a 1 hour gala. I mean, nobody could attend, but it was all via Zoom. And yet there's a plant that will be processing 125,000 tons of peas every year. The plant costs probably $500 to $600 million. That's $500 million. A plant that will employ 120 people at Portage la Prairie. It's huge. Like that's huge. And so, but the biggest challenge that they will have is getting the yellow peas that they need to process. And from that plant, they basically process pea powder. It's protein powder. A lot of bodybuilders and all kinds of stuff. It's even used for some plastics and so forth. But it's a food plant, and Roquettes is a company out of France. and they started doing these kinds of things, and I think it's 90 years old. There's still a grandpa involved in the Roquette family, and they came to Manitoba, and this is going to be their head processing plant in North America. And so, number one, we're really favored to have that plant here. Number two, it's going to create some good economic activity. The challenge that they will have is to get enough peas of the quality they need in order to make their processing possible. Because here in the Red River Valley, we don't grow peas for the simple reason it gets too wet sometimes, even though last year wasn't the case. And peas like it a little drier. So they have to get them from northwestern Manitoba, also from Saskatchewan, and then we'll see that they'll have enough. But you know what? That's a real good news story. The thing is that it's all about protein and plant protein, I should say, plant protein. And so it was quite an event. And then we had a news conference with the three top officials of Roquette, and it was really interesting. I learned a lot from those things. And yes, even at 75, Graeme, I still learn every day something. But that's the whole aspect of it. So when we talk about how good the peas, the fava beans, and the lentils are, and the soybeans are just as good for the land. They do the same thing. It's just that the fella I was visiting with, soybeans aren't part of their bailiwick at this point. It's a separate association in Manitoba, and so the more pulses we grow, according to the people that seem to know, the better it is for our climate. But we've been doing that for years, and so the farmers are looking to cash in on. Yeah, I know I get calls from all over. The farmers are looking to cash in even things that they've done in the past. But right now, the federal government, when it comes to carbon taxes and those kinds of things, are not taking into consideration what the farmers have already done as it comes to zero till and minimum till and those kinds of things. But hopefully some of that will change.
Yeah, for sure, and just gonna be awesome to see what this plant grows into the pea plant over there in Roquette. A lot of protein is going to be produced by them. But one more thing before we get into your tip of the week here. You talked about a engineer from Iran. Reed Precision Farming is where she's from. What she does is Mina and
Oh, right. Mina, and I won't pronounce her last name. Her and her husband are from Iran, and I met her on LinkedIn, and so I had a chance to meet with her this past Monday. And they're engineers, and they're starting a company that will deal with precision farming. It's a new system of drone using groups of drones to take the measurements of field conditions for farmers. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I just wanted to mention it was such a pleasure to meet with her. And the next time we're going to meet together with her husband, so we can. I'm writing an article on it because you know what? Here's a young couple with a 1.5-year-old boy here from Iran, and they're starting a business in Manitoba. And you know what? It's quite exciting. So I will have more on that in the future. She was very concerned that I not write anything before she had a chance to see it, so I have to be careful about not saying too much for the simple reason English is their second language, and so all the technical detail stuff. So that's my hat's off to and I forget her husband's name, but to Mina, and so we'll talk more about that in the future.
Yeah, can be exciting.
Yep.
Welcome Mina and her husband and her child as well to the great province here in Manitoba. It's going to be awesome to hear what updates you have on that story when you do finally finish your article on it. But, talking about one last thing here, Harry, your farming tip of the week for farmers here on Siemens Says. Harry Siemens, farming tip of the week for farmers here on November 24th.
Well, this has to do with what we talked about at the beginning. That farmers check and check with their buyers as to what is actually happening as far as markets are concerned and traffic of those grains that they grow to Vancouver, because that's the port. I mean, I toured that port back in 2019, and they had just expanded it. It's huge, but when you can't get the product in or out, it's a problem. And so we're going to have to wait and see what exactly will happen. So farmers, check with your grain company to make sure you know what's going on.
Yeah, and another great tip from Harry Siemens on Siemens says on the Farm Report. Harry, thanks so much for coming on the show as always. The next time I'll see you is, I believe, it'll turn to the next month. December 1st is, I believe, the next time we will be
Oh, right
talking.
on. Yeah.
Crazy how the year just flies by here, already getting into the last month of the year very soon here. But until then, Harry, you stay safe. Continue to cover, like you said, you're continuing to recover from COVID-19. Stay safe out there, and you know what? I'm excited to hear what we'll be talking about next week on the farm.
You bet. Me too. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out next
You're right
week.
on. Keep up the good work, Graeme.
Thanks, Harry. I appreciate it. And Harry Siemens on the